What if I told you that one of the biggest legends in Hollywood, a man who built entire worlds on screen, who made audiences fall in love with his characters again and again, has now said something most people never expected to hear? Johnny Depp, the man who played dreamers, pirates, lovers, and rebels, stood up and admitted, "I'm done with fairy tales." And it wasn't about movies. It was about love. Now think about that for a second. Haven't we all at some point wondered if love is really as magical as we were told growing up? Haven't we all questioned whether happily ever after is real, or just something that belongs in books and films? Johnny Depp's confession doesn't just reveal his personal truth, it holds up a mirror to our own experiences. And that's exactly why this shook Hollywood, and why it resonates so deeply with people everywhere. Johnny's words weren't just about romance ending. They were about expectations ending. For years, he admitted, he had chased that idea of love being perfect. Perfect timing. Perfect partner. Perfect ending. The whole fairy tale package. The same stories he himself helped bring to life on screen. But in reality, it never looked that way. It never lasted that way. And that realization changed everything. Let's pause here for a moment. Think back to your younger self. Maybe as a teenager, or even in your early 20s. How did you picture love back then? Maybe you thought it would be easy. You meet someone, sparks fly, your problems vanish, and suddenly life is a dream. That's what the movies told us, right? That's what songs and novels kept repeating. But here's the thing, life doesn't follow a script. And Johnny Depp, of all people, admitted he had to learn this the hard way. What makes this so powerful is that Johnny isn't just another celebrity talking about heartbreak. This is a man who, for decades, represented romance, mystery, and passion on screen. When Jack Sparrow looked at Elizabeth Swann, or when Edward Scissorhands held Kim's hand, audiences believed in love. People believed in Johnny's ability to portray those emotions, but behind the camera, behind the makeup and lights, his own search for love was nothing like the characters he played. And that's the painful, yet very human truth. Johnny explained that real love isn't about being swept off your feet every single day. It's not about fireworks exploding endlessly or living in a constant honeymoon phase. In his words, the real foundation is loyalty. It's friendship. It's honesty. It's having someone by your side not only when life is magical, but especially when life feels unbearable. And if you think about it, isn't that a lot more valuable than some perfect scripted ending? Now let me ask you, how many times have you found yourself disappointed in love because it didn't match the movie version in your head? How many times have you thought, maybe it's supposed to feel different? Maybe something's wrong. That's exactly the kind of illusion Johnny's talking about. He's not rejecting love. He's redefining it. Here's where things get even more interesting. Johnny didn't sound bitter when he confessed this. He didn't close the door on love. Instead, he spoke with a kind of wisdom that only comes from living through mistakes, heartbreaks, and lessons you can't buy. He seemed to say, I tried the fairy tale. It didn't work. But I've learned what actually matters. And what matters, according to him, isn't fantasy. It's truth. It's consistency. It's someone showing up when you need them most. Think about that. The strongest love stories aren't built on fantasy. They're built on reality, on everyday moments, on being able to trust someone when life gets ugly. It's not glamorous. It's not picture perfect, but it's real. Now, this isn't the first time we've heard celebrities talk about love being hard. But when it comes from Johnny Depp, it carries a different weight. Why? Because the world has watched his personal life play out in public for years. We've seen his struggles. We've seen his relationships rise and fall, sometimes very publicly. And while the world gossiped, judged, and speculated, Johnny was quietly learning that no matter how big the castle, the fairy tale can still crumble. But here's the beauty of his confession. He isn't saying love doesn't exist. He's saying maybe we've been looking for it in the wrong places. Maybe we've been expecting it to look like fireworks, when really it's more like a steady flame. Maybe we've been waiting for a prince or princess, when the real magic is just finding someone who doesn't leave when things get messy. I want to share a thought with you. Imagine two people. One couple looks perfect on Instagram. They post vacation pictures, they look flawless, and everyone thinks they're living the dream. Another couple? They don't post much. They argue sometimes. Their life is full of ups and downs. But every time they find their way back to each other. Which couple do you think has a stronger foundation? That's the essence of Johnny's point. Love doesn't need to look perfect, it needs to be real. Johnny himself hinted that the happiest moments weren't the glamorous ones. They were the quiet moments, the laughter in the kitchen, the late-night talks, the way loyalty shows up when the cameras aren't around. That's the part of love that Hollywood doesn't show, but it's the part that actually matters. And this is where many of us can relate. How often have we been told that if love isn't exciting every second, it's failing? How often have we compared our relationships to someone else's highlight reel? Johnny is reminding us to stop chasing the fairy tale. Because the fairy tale is just a story. The real story is far less perfect, but far more powerful. Now let me expand on what this means, not just for Johnny, but for anyone who's ever felt disappointed in love. First, it frees us from unrealistic expectations. If you stop expecting constant magic, you start appreciating small moments. A quiet dinner, a partner remembering your favorite coffee, someone checking in when you've had a bad day. Suddenly you see those moments as love instead of dismissing them as not enough. Second, it protects us from toxic cycles. When you chase fairy tales, you can fall into the trap of thinking the next person will be the perfect one. You keep searching, switching, chasing. But when you accept that love isn't about perfection, you're more likely to value the person who actually shows up for you consistently. And third, it deepens your connection. When you know love isn't fireworks 24/7, you're not disappointed when things get quiet. You're not panicked when the spark feels less intense. You understand that real love grows and changes. It's not a constant high, it's a steady journey. Johnny's confession brings all these lessons into focus. And honestly, it's refreshing. In a world that sells us romance in glittery packages, hearing someone admit, "I'm done with fairy tales, I just want something real," feels grounding. It feels honest, but here's something most people miss. When Johnny said he's done with fairy tales, he wasn't closing himself off to love. He wasn't saying he no longer believes in connection or intimacy, or that he's going to lock his heart away forever. No, what he was really saying is that he's opening himself to a different kind of love. A love that's not painted in glossy colors, but one that's raw and real. A love that's quieter, calmer, deeper, and maybe even stronger than the one he spent years chasing. And that's something so many of us can relate to. Because how many times in life do we fall into the trap of expecting love to feel like fireworks? The racing heart, the butterflies, the sweeping gestures, the dramatic storylines that we see in films and read in novels. We're taught that this is what love should be. But Johnny's words remind us that maybe love isn't supposed to be constant fireworks. Maybe it's more like a steady flame, a fire that doesn't explode and vanish, but one that stays warm, dependable, and enduring. Let's dig deeper into that. Fairy tales are designed to end at the wedding. And they lived happily ever after. That's the line. But life doesn't stop there. Real relationships continue past the perfect kiss, past the dramatic reunion, past the mountaintop declaration. Life after the happily ever after is filled with bills, responsibilities, mistakes, growth, setbacks, and the everyday challenges that don't make for glamorous stories. And yet, that's where the truest love is tested. Johnny seems to have realized this truth after living both the fantasy and the reality. Think about it. He's lived the Hollywood version of romance. The cameras, the red carpets, the whirlwind relationships splashed across tabloids. From the outside, it looked like a storybook. But from the inside, it was complicated. It was fragile. And sometimes it was devastating. When he says he's done with fairy tales, he's not saying he regrets love. He's saying he regrets the illusion. He regrets chasing a picture that could never last. What he wants now is something stronger, something slower, something that doesn't burn out in a storm of passion, but grows through quiet loyalty and trust. That kind of love isn't glamorous. It doesn't always look picture perfect, but it's the love that lasts. And maybe that's a lesson for us too. Think about the times in your life when you felt let down by love. Was it really the love that failed, or was it the expectation that it should always feel like a movie? Maybe the disappointment came because reality didn't match the script you had in your head. We've all been there. We've all thought, this doesn't feel magical anymore. Maybe it's not love. But Johnny's words remind us that love changes. It matures. It becomes less about adrenaline and more about stability. Less about perfection and more about truth. Let me give you an example. Imagine a couple in their early 20s. They're wild about each other. They stay up all night talking. They can't keep their hands off each other. Every moment feels electric. That's passion. That's intensity. But now picture that same couple 10 years later. Life has settled in. They've got responsibilities. They've seen each other at their best and worst. The fire is still there, but it's not constant. Instead, what they have now is history, understanding, trust. They know each other in a way no one else does. That's the deeper love Johnny's talking about. It's the kind of love that doesn't just lift you up when you're already happy. It holds you steady when the ground beneath you shakes. It's the kind of love that doesn't vanish when you make mistakes, but instead helps you learn and grow. It's not glamorous, but it's real, and isn't that what we all crave deep down? Sure, the fairy tale is exciting. It's intoxicating. But excitement fades. Life tests us. And when those tests come, what we really need isn't someone who plays the role of prince or princess. We need someone who shows up as a partner. Johnny's confession also highlights something else. Strength doesn't always look like what we imagine. In fairy tales, love is about being swept off your feet, about being rescued, about dramatic gestures. But in reality, strength in love looks different. It looks like forgiveness. It looks like compromise. It looks like two people choosing each other, even when it's not easy. And that's why his statement felt so honest. Because instead of pretending he still believes in the Hollywood script, he admitted he's searching for something more meaningful. It takes courage to say that, especially for someone who has lived under the spotlight for so long. Now, here's a thought that might surprise you. When Johnny said he's done with fairy tales in a way, he was rewriting the fairy tale itself. Because isn't the ultimate happy ending finding peace? Isn't the real fairy tale learning what truly matters and building a life around it? Maybe Johnny's confession isn't the end of a story. It's the beginning of a much more authentic one. Let's reflect on what this means for us. Too often we beat ourselves up when relationships don't look perfect. We compare. We scroll through social media and see couples smiling, traveling, kissing under sunsets, and we think, why doesn't my love look like that? But that's the same trap Johnny fell into, believing the illusion. Behind every perfect photo is a reality we don't see. Every relationship has struggles. Every couple has scars. The truth is, the strongest love stories are not the ones we watch. They're the ones we live. They don't always make sense to others. They don't always look impressive. But they feel safe. They feel honest. And they stand the test of time. Think about the small things. Someone making you a cup of coffee when you're exhausted. Someone holding your hand in silence when words aren't enough. Someone forgiving you after an argument. Those moments don't make headlines. They don't get turned into movies. But they are the foundation of lasting love. And that's exactly what Johnny's words point toward. Here's another angle worth considering. When you let go of fairy tales, you also let go of the pressure to be perfect yourself. Because fairy tales don't just affect how we see others. They affect how we see ourselves. We think we have to look flawless, act flawless, be flawless to deserve love. But real love doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for presence. It asks for effort. It asks for honesty. That's liberating. That's empowering. So maybe Johnny's confession is more than personal. It's universal. It's a reminder that love isn't about achieving a fantasy. It's about showing up day after day even when life is messy. Especially when life is messy, and the beautiful part, when you stop chasing fairy tales, you make room for something far richer. You notice the beauty in the ordinary. You appreciate the person who stays, not because the script told them to, but because they choose to. Every single day, that choice, that quiet, consistent choice, is more romantic than any fairy tale ever written. So, in the end, Johnny wasn't giving up on love. He was choosing a different version of it, a version rooted in truth, a version that's deeper, calmer, and yes, stronger than the illusions he once believed, and maybe that's the real lesson here. Fairy tales are lovely stories. They inspire us, they give us hope, but real life isn't about scripted endings. Real life is about the love that grows in the cracks, in the imperfections, in the ordinary moments. That's the love that lasts. That's the love worth holding on to. So the next time you feel disappointed that your relationship doesn't look like a movie, remember Johnny's words. You don't need a fairy tale. You need something real. And when you find that, when you find the person who shows up, who stays, who chooses you, then you found something far greater than a story. You found your truth. That's why his words shook Hollywood. Because Hollywood thrives on fantasy, on perfect endings, on the illusion that love is grand and glamorous. So when one of its biggest stars says, "That's not real," this is what real love looks like. It forces everyone to think twice. Now I want to turn this back to you. Think about your own life. Have you ever felt disappointed because love didn't look the way you imagined? Have you ever thought maybe you were doing something wrong because it wasn't constant magic? If so, you're not alone. Johnny's story proves that even someone who has lived in the spotlight, who has played the roles we dream about, has faced the same truth. Love is real, but it isn't perfect. And that's okay. So maybe the real fairy tale isn't about being swept away. Maybe it's about being grounded. Maybe it's not about finding perfection, but about finding truth. And that leads me to a question I want to leave you with. Do you believe in fairy tales? Or do you think, like Johnny, that the best love stories are the ones that aren't written in scripts but lived in messy, beautiful reality? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's start a conversation. And if this made you think, stick around, because there's another story about Johnny's unexpected love confession that you don't want to miss. It's a wild one, and I promise it'll make you see him in a whole new light. Before you go, give this video a like if it resonated with you. Share it with someone who still believes in fairy tales. Maybe they'll see love differently after hearing Johnny's truth. And of course, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, because if Johnny Depp has shown us anything, it's that the most unforgettable stories aren't the ones written in books or played on screen. They're the ones lived in real life in all their messy, imperfect, beautiful honesty. And that's the kind of story worth holding on to.